Hi everybody, this is Maria Clark at Sweet Willow Designs and welcome to my studio. Today we have this fun project for an interchangeable bracelet. Let's get started. I have this pre-made bracelet and it's got lobster claw clasps on each side, and I thought it'd be fun to make a component for the center there. I have some clay. I have these these are oval cutters in a variety of sizes. A snowflake off of some kind of Christmas string, and you can see I thought it'd make a great texture. Jump rings, pearlescent powder, some acrylic paintbrush, very thin gloss, and craft knife. So this is the bracelet. It uses these two lobster claw clasps on each side. So I've got my jump rings, and these are about 6mm jump rings, and I'm going to go ahead and put them in on the bracelet blank because I want to do some measuring so I can figure out exactly how big my piece can be, my bracelet component can be. So I've got those set up. I'm just going to measure in between those two jump rings, and I'm going to measure so that it's about halfway in between those jump rings. And you can see I'm measuring that there, and it's just over 1.5 inches. So that tells me how big my piece can be. And then I've got this set of cutters. I love these cutters. These are Atico cutters. I'll put a link below so if you're interested in purchasing those. And I'll just try and see which size of the cutter works. And there I've got one there. It's about the third largest size. And that looks perfect. Here's my blue clay. It's rolled out to the #1 setting on my pasta machine, and I will double that so that I can get a good thickness. Make sure there are no air bubbles trapped in there. I'll mist it with a little bit of water just as a release for this texture piece I'm going to use. And there's that snowflake. I think this actually came from the dollar store on one of those strings, but you know, I kind of look when I'm out and about, I look at everything to say, hey, would that make a good texture on clay? So I pressed it in. I need a little bit more pressure, so I've got this acrylic block that I'll just use to press that in. And I've got a really deep, nice impression. What I'm going to do is use my cutter to sort of orient it on the clay and see how I want to set that for when I make the cut. And then I'll get a piece of plastic wrap and just put it over, not too tightly, but just put it over, and it's going to make a nice bevel on the edge. Get that placed exactly where I want it, and then press down. And there you go. I've got the piece cut. And now what I can just refine it a little bit if I need to, but I'm going to add the two jump rings. And these are what's going to make it interchangeable. So I'll take those off the bracelet blank. And I'm going to use my craft knife to put some slits right in the middle of that piece of clay there on the end. And I'm going to go ahead and put the jump ring in, and I'm looking for where the break in the jump ring is so I can embed that piece in the clay. And then I'll just close that up, and I will make sure that that's really got good contact there. And I'll use a little clay shaper to just smooth that in a little bit and make sure it's well adhered. You don't need to have the clay shaper. It's just something that a tool I happen to have. And get that in there. And I'll do the other side. And again, I'm only placing these in so that the jump ring is about halfway embedded in the clay, and the rest will serve as the connector to the lobster claw clasp on the jump ring, on the bracelet. And I've got that piece in there. Just make sure it's well adhered. And I can refine the shape. You know, I noticed I didn't like the way that one was placed. It was just a little off center, so I'm going to take it out and make that opening again and just replace it so that it's a bit more in the middle and it matches the other side a little better. Close that up, smooth it down. And there we go. For this particular one, I'm going to use some pearlescent powders. And I'm just matching up some colors to the bracelet. They're not exact matches, but they're complementary. So I've got a variety of colors. I've got that pink color and then green here. I'm going to go ahead and use my brush to apply some of the green powder. I love the way that just sort of lights up, and it's just so luminescent. It really like the effect of that. And this is really experimental. If you have these kinds of powders, you just pull them out of your stash and use them, and you can mix them. You could use your finger to apply this. I happen to like the brush for deeply textured items because I sometimes want that texture or that color to be deep in the texture. Here's the pink. And again, I'll have some links below if you're interested in these. So just go ahead and put as much of that color on as you like. It does mix a little bit. I like the way it's kind of getting a purple effect there with the green. Here's a little bit of copper, and I'll highlight some of the areas with some copper. And my last color is this bright gold. I'm just using that to add a little bit more highlight. You can, of course, use any colors that you like, and if you want to just add the one color to highlight the texture, that's a great look. Okay. So I've got as much of this particular pearlescent powder on as I like. I'm going to go ahead and pull that up and get that on my glass baking form. This is actually just a vase from the dollar store, and it has just a slight curve, and it fits in my oven, so I like the sort of the arc of the curve. It fits nicely on the wrist. And I've made another blank. I haven't put any color on this one, but made it the exact same way because I want to show you just another look by adding paint at a different stage. I'm going to go ahead and get those in the oven for 60 minutes. Be sure to tin it so you can prevent scorching. Now here's the two pieces out of the oven. And there's the pearl on that one. And that pearlescent really does bond with the polymer clay, so it's pretty stable. You can add a finish on it if you like. And this is just some metallic paint in a pink color that matches closely to the bracelet, not exactly. And I'm using a brush, just get that in. And then I'll use a damp paper towel to just wipe off as much as I like. And that's another look with a single accent color. And there you go, there's the bracelet, and let's see how these two pieces look on the bracelet. So it's just a simple lobster claw clasp, and you just clasp, seat that jump ring. And there you go. I think that's a really pretty look. I really like the way that turned out. And it's so simple. And here's the other one. This is great for teenage girls or tweens that you might need a project for, or they just want a pretty piece of jewelry. Now, I did a couple of other looks, more kind of a rustic look. So I've got my clay, same thing, rolled out and then folded over. And I'm going to make this one with the sort of swirl. So I've got this copper clay, and I'm using some tin foil just to put some texture on it, kind of give it a leather look. And I've rolled out a snake of clay. I always just freeform this type of design, and so it's sometimes I have to refine it a little bit because it's not perfect, but it's meant to have a rustic look, and I really like that. I really like the Southwest look, so I tend to do that a lot. So I'm just making a little curl and a little swirl there. And then I'll do the other end the opposite way. This is just a matter of trial and error. Just kind of have to move that clay around until you get it in position. And there I've got the second part of that swirl placed. Just refine it a little bit. There you go. Now I'm ready to put the little side pieces on. Those little kind of feather type pieces. I'll take a strip of clay and I will cut equal portions. I want these to be relatively the same size. I will change a little bit to make some of these smaller. Just roll it into a ball and then use your finger to press on one edge to make a teardrop type shape. And I don't press these down really hard when I'm first placing them because I may go back and change my mind about how to place them. So I kind of tack them in place, see if I think they look good in terms of size and shape and position. And once I feel like I have those in the right position, I will go ahead and press them down so that they're well adhered. This one was a little too big, so I'm going to take a little bit of that clay off and just re-roll it, reform the teardrop, and place that final piece. So this is kind of a fun flourish, and now I can just go ahead and tap those down and make sure that they're well adhered to the clay. And as I did with the other piece, I'll put the jump rings on each end and cure this for 60 minutes at manufacturer's temperature. Got the piece out of the oven and I've got some turquoise, burnt umber, phthalo green, and some rust colored paint. I'm going to place the burnt umber down first just to give some highlight, some shadows underneath those pieces and in the cracks and crevices, and I'll remove any excess. Now I've got the phthalo green and I'm just tapping it on. I'm going to simulate the look of sort of vintage rustic metal. Could look like an old leather piece or old wood. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on, and I'm just sort of tapping it on. Here I have the turquoise and I'm tapping it on just randomly, and then I'll use my paper towel to just tap off any excess, kind of mute it down a little bit, get some along the edges, use my finger to move it around. I really like the way the paint interacts with the polymer clay and the base color, that copper, rich copper color. So I think it looks really good. And here I have some of that rust. You see I'm not cleaning my paintbrush. I'm not really worrying about how the colors mix. Just dotting that rust colored around, using my finger to spread it out a little bit. And then I'll just keep tapping on colors till I get enough layers. I'm looking for depth and richness of color and texture, so I'll just keep tapping that on until I get a look that I'm pleased with. And wipe off any pieces that I think are maybe too bright. And there you go. That's how it looks on the turquoise bracelet blank. Now I've got this other piece that I made, which is just a really simple pink flower, kind of like a daisy type flower, and I'm cutting equal portions of the clay so that the petals are consistent, and I've got 8 petals that I'll be cutting. Same technique, just a little bit, the ball of clay and the teardrop is a little bit fatter, and I'll get those placed. You can see that I'll place it so that they're in the same position on opposite sides, and that helps me get some symmetry to how I place these. And get the rest of the pieces in. I'm not putting the centerpiece in first because I'm going to be using a ball stylus to make that center divot for the center of the flower, and I want that to be on last so it sort of overlaps the petals. Got the last petal on there. I'm using a knitting needle to just make the indents for the petal, And then I'll take another piece of clay, roll that into a ball, get that in the center. I'll tap that down and use my ball stylus to make an impression in the center to form the center of the flower. And there you go. I'll add a few little just divots there for texture, and I'll add the jump ring as I did on the others at the top and the bottom. I'll get that in the oven for 60 minutes. So here's the finished piece. What I did, as I did with some of the other pieces, I went around it with burnt umber paint just to get some paint into the recesses of the petals and into the little divots to give it a little bit of depth and texture, and I wiped off any excess with a paper towel. Here are the 4 different pieces that we made in this tutorial. 4 different interchangeable bracelet centers for these bracelet blanks that are pretty easily available in most of the craft stores. I hope you enjoyed this project. I want to thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing, giving me a thumbs up, or leaving me a comment. I love hearing from you. Thanks again for joining me in my studio. Take care.